I just want to answer some simple questions like, hey, do I need to replace it now? Do I wait? What if it leaks? So Seth, tell me, man, when do I need to replace this roof? How do I know? Hey, what's up, everyone? Steve Welty here, CEO of Good Life Property Management, with more tips to help you manage your own rental property. Today, I'm here with Seth, the owner of Resilient Roofing, a partner of Good Life, one of the top roofers in the county. And I just want to answer some simple questions. Like, we're out at a property today, one of my properties, and I have this roof, and it's probably 20 plus years old. It's always on my mind, like, hey, do I need to replace it now? Do I wait? What if it leaks, etc. But it's never like this dollar that people want to spend. So I wanted to get Seth out here and just answer some basic questions, so once and for all of us landlords can understand when we need to replace a roof, why, and get all those common questions answered. So Seth, tell me, man, when do I need to replace this roof? How do I know?
No, that's a good one, Steve. I mean, every roof type's different. This one's shingles. So on shingles, you can usually tell by the way that the granules, that's the rough part on top, start falling off the shingle. So the shingle's made out of a fiberglass mat. And then they put tar on top of that and then put granules on that. Once those start falling off, as these are. So.
Yes. So that's been happening for like 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Exactly. That's super common. So once those start falling off, that means the shingle's breaking down.
Okay.
That lets water seep in. That's kind of the most obvious time question, like you're asking, is when do I know that it's needed? The other time to check is when you have leaks. That doesn't mean the whole roof needs to be replaced, but if you see a leak, something needs to be addressed. Maybe there's just a hole caused by something falling on it, or just the earth shifting. We are in California, the ground moves. Sometimes a leak can just be repaired.
Got it.
But back to your question about age, if it's just too old and the shingles or the underlayment, the waterproofing underneath is just too brittle, it's what we call unrepairable. So we open it up to address that situation and everything just keeps breaking apart. So then we try to spread it out farther and that breaks apart. We spread it out farther, that breaks apart. You just can't repair it once it's past that age of repairability.
Got it. All right. So that's really interesting. So in my case, these granulars, is that the right word?
Yep.
All right. These granulos. All right. So these granulars have been falling off for 4 or 5 years, but I feel like, hey, I didn't replace it. So, hey, I got an extra 5 years of life. Am I just like rolling the dice? Like how long can that happen generally before it's like a bad situation?
No, that's a good one. You're a little bit playing with fire. Right when they start falling off doesn't mean you need a brand new roof right now. But the longer it goes and the more those fiberglass mats, the shingles, soak that water in, we have a tendency it causes more wood damage. So the roof is set up on top of your wood.
Oh, okay, right.
And then you have the fascia, you have eaves, there's a lot going on with the structure of the house. Well, if you have a water leak, sometimes it's not that big of a deal. It is San Diego, it dries out, doesn't cause mold or anything like that right away. But if you leave a leak, and it leaks again, it leaks again, it leaks again, it causes dry rot or water damage. So now, back to your question, when I go to replace the roof fairly quickly, all I have to do is replace the roof. If I wait too long, then I need to replace the roof and the water damage and the damaged wood and all that other stuff. So the price can continually escalate if I wait too long.
Got it. Okay, that's really interesting. So you have to worry about potentially damaging the wood over time, some of that other underlayment, which usually gets replaced anyway, that underlayment, right?
At the same time as the roof, yeah.
So when you mentioned about doing a repair, you'll pull it open and see how the paper is, I guess, the underlayment. And you said if it's too bad, I got to keep going. Can you explain, like, that's interesting to me from an owner's perspective. Like, do you sometimes run into where you can't be repaired and now you just replacement's the only option?
Oftentimes, yeah, and we'll check for that beforehand so we don't mislead someone to think, oh, we can just repair this for a few $100s, and then we get into it and we say, oh, darn, you need a whole new roof. That's misleading, that's bait and switch, we call it. So we'll do a full assessment first to see in what condition it is. But it's kind of like if anyone's ever going to repaint something, old furniture or something, and you go scrape it and the paint keeps flaking and flaking and flaking. It's kind of like that. It's so dry. We go to open it up because I put my new stuff underneath. Roofs are all about layers and I want the water to run off. So I put my new underlayment under the old underlayment, but it keeps cracking and ripping and falling apart. I can't waterproof that properly. That's kind of what I meant by it's just beyond that age of repair. It's not repairable anymore.
Got it. Okay. Another thing that's been on my mind with this place, and I think a lot of people's minds, is do I need rain gutters? Like, I don't have rain gutters on this house. Like, is that an issue? And when do you need them?
A lot of people think rain gutters are for the roof, or for rainwater, which partly it is. It's actually for the foundation of the home. So oftentimes, and you can kind of see the way that this is sloped, the rainwater will actually go back toward the house. That's not good long term, because it'll soak up the dirt underneath the house and then slowly come up through the foundation. Then you start getting that musty smell, or like if you have carpet, you kind of get that mildewy, smell. That's actually from long term, either sprinklers, rainwater, groundwater, going back up slowly through the house. So what rain gutters do is it takes the water off of the roof and we tell it where to go, so it pushes it to the part where it's going to drain away from the house, instead of pushing it right in front where it's just going to go right pile up by your front door or something like that. So I am a fan of gutters, partially biased because we do gutters. We take care of all that too. It's all seamless. They're all aluminum or copper. They come out with no seams, so you can do a 300-foot run of gutters if you want.
Oh, nice.
And then we put the downspouts on. We do the whole thing. We lay it out all for you. It's not totally necessary, but it is recommended, and especially for certain areas like this front, for instance, where, like I say, this ground rolls right back to the house. Let's at least do gutters maybe just on the front of it.
Yeah.
So that right now it doesn't have a problem, but in 10 years, rain, it could start causing a problem inside. Sometimes you'll see wood floors and they'll be cupping or buckling. Same thing, that's not from any active leak, that's water coming up through the foundation. So anyway, gutters help get that away from.
Okay, cool. So how much does a new roof cost? I know anyone can get an estimate, but like, is there a good rule of thumb if someone's not quite to the estimate stage of like what they might be looking at?
I'm sure it's hard to estimate just how much is a roof, but San Diego does have kind of an average size roof, and of course, after years of doing this, we do know an average cost, for a new roof. So our average cost for a new roof is about $20,000. That is not a quote, don't take that as a quote, but there are so many different options. So this roof is shingles. We have flat roofs, we do tile roofs, we do metal roofs, all have various pricing. And of course, it depends on the complexity, but more so the size of the roof. And as we talked to earlier, how much other work needs to be done or doesn't need to be done for the roof. If I can just take these shingles off and put new ones on, simple. If we have to do a bunch of wood repair and we do want new gutters and we're going to paint the fascia, let's say, or do some add-on things, or we have this really cool reflective insulation that goes underneath the shingles to help keep the heat down. Well, that's not normal, but we can do it, and it adds a little bit of cost, but keeps the energy bills down. Point is, there's a lot of variabilities, what quality materials, what warranties, and all those things, which of course we'll help with. We don't charge for any of that consulting. We just want to get the right price for what the people are wanting or needing out of the house.
Got it. All right, so if I'm trying to get the most use out of my roof and I'm just putting it off, procrastinating maybe at a certain point, and I get my first leak, like where do the leaks usually come from and how are they repaired?
That's a really good question. So the most common area for a leak is where the pipes come through the roof, the vent pipes or the exhaust fans, that kind of thing. That's a hole in the roof. And then there are ways to we call it flashing. We put that metal around there, that collar that goes around. But with house movement, earth movement, with the shifting of the materials up on the roof, that can cause a little bit of a gap in between those different materials. And then that's a perfect spot for water to get in. The thing with that, especially with a pipe going through the roof, you don't really see those pipes in your house. You see them in the attic, but they go through the walls in your house. So it's actually really common to have a leak on one of those pipes. But sometimes that water coming down those pipes leaks onto the floor. So people are scratching their heads like, where is this water coming? No one thinks it's coming from the roof, but it's going through the roof, through the attic, down the pipe, into the wall, and then onto the floor. But it was a roof leak all along. The other common spot for a roof leak is in the valleys. You have a valley right here on the front. That's where two downslopes of a roof come together.
Okay.
Partially because of the movement, but mainly just because that water's sitting there longer. You have a chance for that water just to make its way in and find every little weak. Water's good. It finds any weakness, it'll find it. Whereas if you just have a regular old slope of the roof, very rarely does water just find its way in on a big open slope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really on the edges or the penetrations or the areas of movement or traffic. If people are climbing up and down Christmas lights, that kind of thing, that can cause movement and rips and tears and then leaks.
All right, cool. So if I'm a homeowner who doesn't have 20 grand, and even if the roof needs to be replaced, I don't have it, but hey, I know it needs to get done. So I'm going to save up and I'll be ready in, let's say 2-3 years. How good are you at finding maybe where spots might leak in advance? Is that possible?
That's a good one. Yes. So oftentimes with a repair, usually people don't call us just for preventative maintenance, but while we're there doing a leak repair, there are preventative maintenance type things I can do to help so they don't have to call us again for a few years. So a common area for leaks is those pipe vents. So as we're repairing, let's say a valley was leaking and we go open up that valley, replace all the materials, put it back together. Well, while we're there for 20 extra bucks, I mean, it hardly costs anything, is we'll go through and we'll seal all of those other pipe vents. Nice. You know what I mean? We're already there. We already got the guys, the material, the know-how. Let's just do it. So that's super common. Another one is if you have gutters. Gutters can back up with leaves if there's a tree close by. And then that backing up of the leaves causes the water to back up. That water coming from the gutters can actually go up under the roof right there and cause longer term wood damage. Simple thing like cleaning out the leaves out of the gutters. We can take care of that while we're here too. So yeah, there are preventative maintenance type things just to get us through the winter season or, you know, a couple years until we sell the house or whatever it happens to be. Super common.
Okay, so if you have tenants in the property, Seth, how long does it take to replace a roof, and can it be done in like a short period of time with tenants there, or do they always need to be vacant for some long period?
It depends on the roof type and how extensive the project is, but 9 times out of 10, the occupants can totally stay in the house, whether it's a rental or not. But that's where we rely on a good property management company like Good Life to notify the tenants, give them our updates and our schedule so that it works with their schedule. We don't want to inconvenience anybody, but it is loud. So even if they can stay in the house, it is really disruptive. So we're tearing your old roof off, we're putting a new roof back on. They say the average roof has 7,000 nails. And they use a nail gun. It's not a hammer anymore, but still it's boom, boom, boom times 7,000. It's a lot going on. So proper notification. If they work from home, they might want to go during the day, but at night, it's totally back to their house again.
So what's the average time it takes for a normal roof?
Oh, that's a good one too. So tear off is always done in one day, half a day sometimes, depending on the size. Then we get it waterproofed, and then we install the shingles or the tile or the flat roof, whatever material it is, kind of changes the time a little. 2 or 3 days is average. The bigger it is, of course, the longer it takes. The only exception to that is a tile roof. Even if we're reusing the tiles, which is super common, we take them off, we have to set them aside, then we take off the old underlayment, then we put our new underlayment back down. Meanwhile, we have to move the tile stacks all around. Then we put the new tiles back on. That takes at least a week, a business week, so 5 working days on average.
Wow. So only 2 to 3 days for like a roof like this.
A normal roof is just a couple days,
Wow.
yeah.
All right, so we're here at this job. Like, what do you need to know in order to give me a quote or steer me in the right direction?
I mean, just from looking at it, there's a lot I can find out. It's shingles now. The neighborhood is mostly shingles, so I kind of probably going to assume that we're leaning towards shingles. But I want to ask that too. What type of roof material? How long have you owned the home or lived here, depending on if it's a rental or not? What level of quality do you expect? How long are you planning on keeping the home? Those all help us get to our suggested roof package, you know? So like we were talking earlier about repairing versus replacing. Well, if you're going to sell the house next year, and we know that for sure, a new roof actually does help sell the house faster and for more money.
Yeah.
But at the same note, if you just don't have it, well, let's try to find a way to get just to the sale, you know, and then let someone else deal with it. For the same note, if you're keeping it for 30 years, you have no plans on selling it ever, it's a long-term investment, well, let's get it done and get it done right, you know, so that you don't have to deal with it later in the future. For the same note, if it's a rental now, maybe it's going to turn into your private residence later, same thing. Let's do a nice roof so it's just something you don't have to worry about later down the road.
Perfect. And are there any tax credits or efficiency credits in roofing at all?
A little bit. There's a few energy efficient credits. They're not much. They're hundreds of dollars. Every bit helps, but mainly it's for the reflective barrier. It's called thermosheet underneath. The solar attic fans, which help a ton. Those there's a credit for. And then using certain shingles over others, there's a little bit of a credit for.
All right, so now I have Bryce, our director of property management, out here to see the other side, because we have a lot of owners that, you know, don't want to replace a roof proactively unless they absolutely have to, and that makes sense. You want to save money, but there are other considerations that are super important to understand and learn more about. So Bryce, like last year when we had a ton of weather, like from a property manager's perspective, what should clients be aware of?
Yeah, sure. So bad weather doesn't hit San Diego very often, but when it does, it's usually a deluge and people are left scrambling, especially at a rental property. You're like, oh, I haven't maintained my roof, or I was not aware. There's not much you can do. Sometimes water is going to get into your house. When that happens, no matter how good of a relationship you have with the roofer, they're slammed, right? They're getting literally hundreds of calls for people who need their roof fixed and they want it fixed right away. So you kind of got to get in line. So when that happens, I mean, first you want to set your expectations of how soon people can get out there. Roofers are doing their best to handle the influx of work orders, but it's going to take longer to get an inspection. It's going to take longer to make the repair. It's going to take longer to replace the roof if that's what you ended up doing. So that's where it comes into preventative maintenance, is usually a sound investment, and doing things when it's sunny and beautiful. That's actually the best time to look at your roof before you're left scrambling and there's a huge backlog.
Yeah, and being proactive on the relationship side. When people didn't have a relationship with a roofer during that crazy wind and rain last year, what was happening?
Yeah, what was happening was a lot of frustration for sure, and waiting weeks and weeks for even get somebody on your roof, and then you're having to spend extra time and money into getting a contractor or somebody else to hop on the roof, put a tarp on it. Your tenants are left with a tarp on the roof for an extended amount of time. So it can lead to more frustrations when you're waiting until the bad weather actually hits. And so that's what, especially during our quote unquote hurricane, that's what we saw a lot of properties we're dealing with, was just like a really extended amount of time and a lot of frustration.
Yeah, so if there's like one roofing tip I can fully recommend that's easy, is build that relationship with the roofer. Like, we as property managers, we have good relationships with the roofers, but as an owner, you might not. So like Seth's company, they can come out and tarp a roof. Talk to us a little bit about that, Seth, and like how that process works.
Back to what you were saying, Bryce, what I love about Good Life is you've built all those relationships, not just with roofing, but HVAC. It gets hot in the summer. Same thing, you need a call right now. So you guys are proactive on that. And as much as I hate saying it, it is true, when we get those hundreds of calls, which is completely legit, we do filter. It's kind of triage, let's go to them first, and then this person who's never called me before, we'll get to you, but it's going to be a little bit behind. So you guys do go to the front of the list with your clients. But no, it is like triage. It's, my wife and I were just talking about, we went to a dinner party. When the weather was good, someone asked, what do you do for work? Oh, roofing. They're like, oh, cool, no one cares. But when it's bad weather and they ask, what do you do? Oh my gosh, I need you.
Yeah, right.
So when we get that call, obviously we do look at the schedule, and there's a few levels of repair that we can take care of. Tarp, like you said, that is emergency triage. I mean, that is just stop the leaking right now, But as soon as we pull that tarp, the leak's still there. So then we have to go back, inspect it, see exactly what we can do. So during an actual rainstorm, we do have 3, 4, 5 crews sometimes out just tarping, just emergency repairs. Yeah. Then the next day and the weeks beyond is inspecting and seeing what we need to do and actually coming up with a plan. Is it repairable, first of all? If so, what repairs do we propose? And then talk to the client about that. If it needs a new roof, or if it was already planned on needing a new roof, then we'll look at scheduling that out. But again, it is kind of like an instant jump into our schedule. So if we were 2 weeks out before, now we're 2 months out sometimes. So it does kind of build at the back of the line. But if I can get a tarp on there and hopefully it lasts a couple months, that's fine. And then we'll actually get to the repair once the schedule opens up.
Yeah, having a good vendor that can tarp a roof is actually hard to find and quite unique. And so to offer that service is a huge value add. And so I'm going to continue to try to dive into the mind of some of our listeners or some of our viewers out there and think, okay, cool. So I got Resilient, I know Good Life. Maybe they don't manage my property, but I could reach out, they could tarp a roof. So I'm just going to wait until this thing leaks. Bryce, why might we not want to do that?
Yeah, the reactivity to roofing is really, really tough for a rental property in particular, because obviously you have tenants living in the home and they're living through the project. As a homeowner, you might be a little more forgiving for having living through an active leak. But in California, there's a lot of concerns around habitability. You start talking about rent credits, frustrations might rise with them. So waiting until that roof is actually actively leaking is problematic, because it's really different than normal, like if your sink leaks, or even a slab leak, which it can be scary, but it's actually a lot more straightforward. Your plumber goes in and they fix it, and it's done within a few days, if that.
Right.
Now, when there's a roof leak, it can be a little more involved, and there's higher dollar amounts, right? Where you have to get a specialist who, like I said, with the bad weather, it can take a little longer for them to get out there, and you might want multiple quotes. Usually, if you're throwing a plumber in there, because of the dollar amount and the urgency of it, you're usually able to repair it so much quicker. But with the roof, you're like, oh, well, that's so high, I actually don't want to replace, so now I need to get another vendor out there who's backlogged. So it can really create this like cascading domino effect of it taking weeks, months to get a roof leak repaired.
Yeah, you can frustrate your tenant pretty quick, which can end up costing a lot of money. All right, so Bryce, that's a great point. Looking at the fact that the tenant might be living in a roofing project, which sounds horrible, might cost them more money in rent credits, could lead to the M word, mold, all sorts of things that can happen. So what do you recommend, I guess, for people to do to be proactive with a roof that might actually be close to being replaced?
Yeah, totally. So whether you lived there for a long time and you moved out of your house and rented out, or you just closed on the home, it's really important to know your roof's age, right? And I'll let Seth maybe speak to more of the actual tactical preventative maintenance options and recommendations. In my experience, a lot of our clients kind of push back on investing, a few hundred or upwards of a couple $1,000s a year on the roof. When you consider the full costs of a roof leak project while it's an emergency, it adds up to way more. It's like investing into your car, right? It's like if you do that preventatively and actively and on a consistent basis, it's going to run better and you're going to avoid like a breakdown, right? To think of the preventative few hundred or thousands, whatever kind of package you go for, as throwing money away is not a winning strategy, because in the end, when that roof leaks, you're going to have, like you said, the dreaded 4-letter M word of potential mold forming, especially if it's a small insidious leak that doesn't appear until it drips through your ceiling and it's been in your attic for a long time. You have the mitigation costs, you have the reconstruction costs within it, and the potential rent credits to the tenants, their spiked energy bill from the running equipment. So there's a plethora of additional costs once it actually finally does leak.
Yeah, those dry out fans are expensive on the SDG&E bill.
Yeah.
Seth, what's the age? Talk to us about ages of roofs. What should we be aware of?
If a roof is 10 years old or younger, there's really nothing that we have to do. Unless it has a leak. We just repaired a leak 2 days ago. It was a 4-year-old roof. It was just installed improperly. Luckily, it was only one area. We were able to fix it. No problem. But as far as maintenance, still, even after, let's say, year 10, there's not much I do every year. But let's say at about year 10, call us out. We'll just seal all the flashings and the pipes, clear out debris, just kind of go do a once around over the whole roof. And that's less than $1,000. I mean, we're up there for just a few hours, some basic materials, and we can clean it up. That's probably good for the next 5 years. Then at year 15, do the same thing. And then it starts accelerating, maybe every 3 years, and then 2 years, and then once a year, until we get beyond that point of repairability like we were talking about earlier. After a certain age, there's just not much that we can do to bring the life back to some of the components that have dried out. Now they're cracking, they have cracks, water's coming in. There's not a lot of repair work that you can do. What some companies do, it's called chasing leaks, and we're not a big fan of this, but let's say it's leaking over on this side of the house. Well, that gets repaired, but then it starts leaking over here. Okay, let's go repair that, and then it leaks right above it. Then the client thinks that was the area that you just patched and you did a bad job. That could be, but the point is that should have been replaced on the first repair. It shouldn't have been repaired, So you're really not doing the client a service, because now you're charging them for repair. Meanwhile, it's causing more wood damage. The replacement bill goes up. You just wasted all their money. So really, sometimes you do need to just pull the Band-Aid off and replace.
So from a management perspective, a lot of times when a roof does need to be replaced, there's obviously sticker shock. It's one of the most expensive components of maintaining your home. What a lot of clients don't do is that they don't budget for what we call capital expenditures, right? The more expensive, there's minor repairs here and there throughout a year. You can expect most people are okay with weathering that.
Yes.
But when you get the $5,000, HVAC repair, or the $20,000 to $30,000 roof replacement, all of a sudden, some clients are left scrambling because they haven't set aside money on a recurring basis, right? You don't have a nest egg for the home. To be able to invest in it, you don't have to find yourself between a rock and a hard place. I know a lot of roofing companies do offer financing options now, which can certainly help, but it's a great thing for a client to take it in stride, to be able to replace it without feeling a huge financial strain. And then also realizing that that investment you're making is one of the most important investments you can make into your home, both for the actual maintenance and care for your tenants and renters, but also for the long-term value of the home. A brand new roof on a sales listing is one of the most attractive features, especially for first-time home buyers. So there's you're getting a lot of ROI back on that big investment you're making into your home.
Yeah, you probably save some sleepless nights, because I know it's out of sight, out of mind in San Diego most of the time, but when that rain comes, you feel like a property manager as an owner, because as a property manager, when the rain comes, I'm like worried it's a tough night. But you don't need to feel that way as a homeowner. If you got a roof and you at least know what you're dealing with, newer roof, then you know what you're dealing with, if not. So putting money away, I love that you brought that up, because I had a real world example that some of you guys can probably relate to, at least learn from. So I have a partner in this property, and we were meeting to go over the finances, and there was like $20,000 in the account. And I was like, okay, cool. We only need 15 in there at any time. Let's pull that 5 out. And then we brought up, well, wait a minute, what about the roof? Doesn't the roof need to be replaced at some point? We're like, oh yeah, that CapEx expenditure. So, we say, hey, let's budget maybe another 15 just in case. So actually, instead of taking a draw, we're building it back up to that 30 mark. That way we don't have to pull money out of our pocket, out of our personal expenses, and we can be better prepared. It's a really hard place to get to. It takes discipline, but that is a pro tip that I was glad we were able to work out there.